back to Resolution, the official podcast from the Restorative Justice Council. I'm your host, Glenn Miller, and today we are going to hear from two participants who have had experience in participating in a restorative conference. We're going to be talking to them about how they found out about restorative justice and why they actually decided that they wanted to take part. So it's going to be a very interesting episode today. So today I'm actually joined by Gemma. Hi. Gemma, welcome. And Rob.
Hello
welcome
there.
along. Rob, if you don't mind me starting with you, can I ask you just to tell us in your own words what happened on the day of the incident, the offence?
I ended up being involved with a couple more friends of mine, and we ended up going to a petrol station, running in with balaclavas, knives, machetes, threatening the staff, trying to get money, but we got pennies and ran out. It was in and out, but yeah, try to get loads of money, didn't get it, and ran away.
Okay, if you don't mind me asking, what motivated that particular incident for you? Why did you decide that day to do that?
Full of drugs, full of drink. Just there was no schedule. There was no right. Well, we'll do this shop. It could have been any shop. It ended up being that shop. There was no. We didn't plan it. We didn't sit down like you see on all these big Hollywood movies. It was just a spur of the moment, stupid thing that took place.
Right. Okay. So you were just sitting around, chatting or whatever else, and saying we need.
Both of us were wanted for recall back to prison. Like I say, there was other people involved as well. There were obviously not good people. I don't know. It was just a room full of ignorance, and I don't know what it was. It happened, and I still look back and I don't realise how I end up being involved in it. But
sure, no worries. Gemma, just moving maybe across to you then. What are your recollections of what happened that day?
Well, up until obviously they walked in, it was just a normal day at work. It was just a normal night at work. And getting ready to close up, these two lads walked in, and that's again, it wasn't really unusual for people walking in that close to closing time, but then all of a sudden I clicked what they were wearing and what they had in their hands, and then it just became a very abnormal closing shift. And the rest of it really was a blur until I started to give statements afterwards, and then it all started flooding back at what had gone on. Obviously, the more information I can give the authorities, the better. But it just became a very, very strange ending to what seemed a very normal shift.
Okay, so talk to us about what actually transpired, if you're okay with that. So you're saying it was a strange ending. You see these guys coming in. Takes you a moment or two to recognise what's going on. So what actually then happened? Because obviously we've heard from Rob saying they come in and did whatever, but from what was that like from your perspective?
Like I say, it was a really strange ending to a shift, and it just, I mean, the other lad, it wasn't Rob, it was the other lad that forced me behind the tills along with another colleague. And I mean, from there, Rob didn't really have a huge part in it. He was just in the store, and he was there with a bag for life, and that was it. It's I mean, I've always maintained that he was in that, the spare part. He wasn't really the ringleader in it, because he didn't directly do anything that really affected me. It was the friend of his that did all the work, really. But it was the way it just all happened, and it seemed to take an age to go through, but when we've actually gone through it all, and like I've played it back over and over in my head, it was literally a minute and a half, and they were in and out. And it almost seemed like it was planned and it was done down to every detail, but they were considering it wasn't planned. It was so quick, because they had an agenda, and it was money, and they went in and they got it. So, but it like I say, it was a really strange ending to what seemed a really, really normal shift.
And were you physically harmed during the altercation?
No, I was threatened by the other one with one of the appliances that he had in his hand, and that's kind of what made me go behind the tills, because I was refusing to go at the time, and my colleague just looked at me, and it was, I don't ever want to see that look on her face again. It was almost like, it's not worth it, just... so I followed her behind the tills, and then after that, but I didn't realise what I'd done until my colleague had told me after the fact. And then it kind of hit home at what the little flash was at the corner of my eye. It was the light hitting off one of the blades that he had in his hand.
Right, okay.
So it was, and then after that, it was just all a blur. And it was one of those moments where, with the adrenaline going, you don't know what you want to do and what you should be doing. You can be taught, you can have training on, if this happens when you're on shift, this is what you do. But at the end of the day, that training goes right out the window. And I'd not been working there long at the time either, so all the training was still relatively new, but we didn't have training on should this event occur.
Yeah. All right, so that's obviously quite traumatic experience in terms of you've just turned up for work. You're, like you said, it's the end of the shift, it's near the end of the night, and then this transpires, and it almost takes until after the incident has happened for the pieces to start coming together for you as to what really happened here.
Yeah, it was more or less like when after I got home, that things were starting to pop back into my head of like, well, that happened. And I mean, even though I'd given the police a statement of everything, I'm like, did I tell the police that? And then I've gone back over it again and said, well, yeah, I have, and done this and done that. And then, I mean, my husband asked the really obvious question of, are you all right? And I'm like, well, it's one of them things. You say yes, but you don't realise until hours, days, weeks after the fact that you maybe it's not quite as okay as you think you are.
Okay, so just sticking with you here for the moment, what happened next? So there's the incident takes place, you're interviewed, whatever. What happens next? How does this end up being dealt with?
I mean, I got a phone call, I think it was just after Christmas, saying that they'd wanted to come and do a follow-up interview because they were going to court. And they wanted like a victim statement like after the fact of how it's affected us and how it's this and that and things like that. And I remember the police coming round after that and taking that statement, and then that was literally the end of the involvement from the local police.
Okay. And yourself up to that point, was that where it ended for you, or did you then end up in court then?
No, I didn't end up in court after that. Mine and my two colleagues that were on shift that night, our statements were read out in court to them.
Okay.
And that's kind of like where the police involvement just came to a very abrupt end.
All right, so you've been asked about it, you then are followed up with a victim statement, and that's it. You're just kind of left hanging, not knowing what potentially is going to go on next, or what may this go. Okay.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, I did request to be told what sentences they were given and things like that, and I still had no communication from them either about that.
And maybe just quickly, how did that feel when with this idea of not being kept in the loop?
I felt forgotten, considering the level of crime it was, and the town that it happened in. It's fairly quiet. It's a nice little place, or it was, and it's to just be ignored like that. That's honestly what it felt like. It felt like I'd just been shoved to the bottom of the heap and forgotten. Right, I'm not sure about my other two colleagues, but they probably would be, and it's just that of such a magnitude to happen in a nice small little town, to then just be, right, well, we'll take your victim statement to court. That's it. Don't, if you feel like you need to speak to somebody, go here, or here's a number for you to phone, or anything like that. It was nothing like that, nothing at all. Yeah.
So on top of all of what comes with an incident like that, and then this, it kind of just compounds in and going, good God, what the hell has just happened?
Yeah, it kind of messes with your head to the point of, I didn't know how to process it. I've never ever had anything like that happen. I mean, the job that I'd had previous to that, working in the healthcare system, I've dealt with violence and things like that from the people that I've cared for, but they have a good excuse for it. Whereas this, I was working in a petrol station, that's not normal for that kind of work. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know how to process that, and it was to not have any advice or someone to call or speak to about how to even process the nightmares, flashbacks, and everything else. It felt really unfair.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to that a wee bit later on as well. Rob, I just want to come back to you. So this incident happens. You get in, you get out, and just like I was saying to Gemma, what happened next? What transpired after this?
You see it on movies. They're running to get thousands of pounds to go and move and live in sunny Costa del somewhere like that. We walked a quarter of a mile away from the incident, sat in one of my co-accusers' flats. They sat in the bedroom doing what they were doing. I sat in the front room cleaning blood up of one of them. They'd had a fight with each other and there was blood all over the flat. Sat in the flat for 2 days and then the police came and arrested us. I don't know, like, I'm talking about me, like, I don't have a clue what I got involved in that for. I've never done anything like that in my life. Been in trouble loads of times with violence, pub fights, whatever, but not an armed robbery. So I don't know. I just sat in the flat, didn't know what to do. I didn't know what you were supposed to do next. I didn't know what to do in the shop. Mm-hmm. Like Gemma says, I stood there like a spare part with a bag for life in my hand. Didn't say nothing. Didn't speak to no one. Just stood in the middle of the place with a bag. But yeah, we just went back to one of my co-accusers' houses and sat there.
Okay, and then obviously you were saying the police arrive a couple of days later. You're arrested for this. What's going through your mind when you get arrested for this? What thoughts are you trying to process?
Big jail. Like I say, I've been to jail. Never committed out like this, but armed robbery's up there with one of the worst crimes you can commit. And I was thinking, oh, this is it now. This is the big one. And just going to jail. Sat there. Obviously, the lad who ran in the shop with me, I'm not really... I don't really know him personally. He was there at the time, so it wasn't like I could have any comfort or support of him because he didn't... he wasn't bothered, so I didn't have a clue. I just thought it's massive, massive jail.
Mm-hmm. And what was the court process like for you? Because obviously you ended up in court. You get sentenced for this. What was that experience like for you?
We didn't go to court.
You didn't go?
We got sentenced in prison.
You get sentenced in prison?
Oh, everything. We seen nothing. We sat in a room, but probably about 6 foot by 6 foot with a little tiny 20-inch TV. And the judge said, "How do you plead?" We said guilty, and then we got sentenced. That was it. And
did you hear
nothing.
The victim statements?
Nothing. Didn't hear nothing. Didn't see nothing. Didn't know who was in the courtroom. Didn't hear my barrister speak. Didn't hear obviously the others speak. Nothing. All we got told was, "How do you plead?" We pled guilty. Got sentenced. Got took out the room. Went back to our cell.
And that was it.
And I didn't even know how long I got. I had to ring home because I got sentenced in months. So we got sentenced for an armed robbery. Then we got sentenced for carrying a weapon. Then we got we had outstanding crimes, bits and bobs. So we just got loads of months. And then the officer who was sat there, he asked me how long I got. And he was supposed to tell me. And he said, "Oh, you'd have to ring home." Didn't even know.
Right. Okay. That's baffling for me, in terms of just even hearing that. That's crazy. And Gemma, just to bring you back in around that, so just to try and get a sense of how you might feel there in regards to, you were asked to make this statement, and it doesn't even get used.
Yeah, that's actually the first time I've heard that it wasn't actually read to him, to any of them. So that right now feels like a huge waste of half an hour of my life, of that police officer sitting in my living room while my husband was with our 2 kids upstairs, keeping them out of the way, because at the time they were 6 and 3 and knew nothing about it. That feels a huge waste of my time that day. And
that, again, probably fits into that whole idea of feeling like forgotten. Gee, what was the point in this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling. What is the point of getting that statement if you aren't even going to? I mean, even if it wasn't read to him, he could have read it. They all could have read it. It was there in black and white. It was written out in black and white. They all could have read it.
Sure.
And the fact that even the local paper had said that they were read out in court. So I believe that they were read out in court.
Okay. So I suppose for me that also highlights maybe some of the things that we're talking about on this podcast in terms of the reason why some people would get involved in terms of restorative justice. Maybe there are some shortcomings in the dominant justice system. But Rob, what I'm interested in finding out from you is, how did you actually find out about our restorative justice process, and maybe then talking a bit about maybe some of the challenges that you faced in regards to be able to maybe access that. But first, talk to me about, how did you actually find out about restorative justice?
Well, I think I've done about 6 years in jail before this sentence, and I've never even heard of restorative justice. It's not a thing in prison, in home house, prison I was at. No one even knew what it was. It was only because I got padded up with a lifer, and he said, "What about restorative justice? Wouldn't you think about doing that?" And he was from down the road. And I went, "What the hell's restorative justice?" He went, "You can send a letter to your victim of your crime, or you can meet him." And I was like, you're pulling my leg, you're joking. I thought he was. Obviously, he's been in 20 odd years, and I was thinking, he's trying to pull my leg. And he went, "No, look," and he showed us, and that's how I found out about it. Like, being sat in the cell, knowing I've committed an offence that I wouldn't have normally, and that there's people involved that I'd love to have said, "Look, I'm so sorry," on that day, never mind the next day or a year, 2 years later. And that's how I found out off a lifer.
All right, so you found out from somebody who you were in prison with about this process called restorative justice. You then obviously do some kind of looking into it in terms of what it is. What then did you do to try and get it? Because obviously there was maybe something about that made you think, well, listen, I want to try this out. But what was that process like in terms of you being in prison, trying to get someone to say, "Listen, I'm interested in doing this"? Was that easy for you to get done, or did you find that there were things in your way?
No, I don't think there was nothing in my way. It was just no one knew about it. There was only the certain few people in the prison, but you're thinking there's 1,300 lads in the prison, so for them to get round to you, in the prison I was in, it was a kiosk, so you dealt with all your apps and your general, like, going to healthcare and everything on the computer. So I just scrolled down, the lifer showed me, there it was. I clicked through a couple of things, and there it was, restorative justice. Put in for it, didn't think out of it, and then a couple of weeks later I had someone knocking on my door.
Okay, so talk to me about that. So you do this, you go through this looking for something, you find it, you apply for it, and then someone comes to see you. And what happens then?
Like, a lot of people think restorative justice, what, you see your victim, so they pick up the phone now, then we'll go and pop for a cuppa. It's not like that. There's loads and loads and loads of things that restorative justice have to do behind the scene. But a lot of things I don't even know that they've done, and so it's slow, and they have to come and speak to me to see if I'm not just trying to do it to, like, get my tag or whatever, they need to come and see, like, if you really mean what you're saying, because there's people involved here who've already been heartbroken because of the crime. Then for you to just be half-assed and be like, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm sorry, but really, you know what I mean, it's your fault, really," type of thing. But so yeah, they do a lot. They just come, speak to you, ask you a few questions, see what I want out of it, and they just get the general gist of what you're all about.
Yeah, so they're just checking out whether you're genuine or not. You're not just
slow. It's slow and steady. There's no rush. Like, people in jail think that, what, you're going to see your victim of the crime? What, a week later? No, it's not. It's not like that, because they have to go back to the victims of the crime who could turn around and say, "What? He done this to me, and now you think, I want to go and see him. You know what I mean? They could put two fingers up to that straight away and just the barriers up. But, I don't know, ours was good.
So, Gemma, just bringing you back in there. So, Rob is obviously, or is mentioning here that he finds out about this restorative justice service, and he's already said that they've made him aware at some point they have to come and talk to you in regards to this. How did you feel when you first found out that Rob was trying to maybe explore the use of restorative justice as an approach?
Well, I was a little bit like Rob. I didn't even know it existed until I had the phone call from Becky saying that, look, we've had a communication from Rob. He's wanting to basically get in touch to apologise, and it just started the ball rolling from there. And she said, well, how would you feel about, going down the route of letting him do that? And there's several ways it can be done, letter, meeting him in person, and so much and such forth. But I was like Rob, I was completely in the dark about it until I just had a really random phone call one day about, do you want to meet him, or do you want to have communication with him for him to, in a way, get it off his chest and say and apologise? And at a quick answer, I just kind of sat and went, well, yeah. Because like I say, on that day, he was just the spare part anyway. It wasn't really, he didn't really have that much to do with what happened. He was just there. And then that kind of started the ball rolling with the communication back and forth. And like Rob said, it is a long slog. It's not, you don't say yes to the conversation and then 2 weeks later you're meeting up and you're having a cup of coffee and you're voicing your opinions to each other. It's not, it takes a while because it's got to go back and forth. You've got to make sure that both parties are mentally ready for it, and you've got to make sure that both parties are genuine as well. It's not just on Rob's part of whether he's genuinely wanting to do it. It's on both parts.
So the fact would have been here if Rob had have approached you, or in terms of through the Restorative Justice Agency that looked after this, and you'd have said no, that would have been the end of it then?
Yeah.
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 What made you say yes?
I don't know. I think it's probably mainly down to me being, one, stubborn, and two, it was wanting to voice my opinion, really. It's, because at the time I thought he'd had the victim statement in court, so he knew kind of what I'm saying the immediate impact that it had over the Christmas period and into the early new year, and he knew that impact, but then he doesn't know 6 months, a year down the line of how that did affect me. And I'm thinking, well, he needs to know that as well. They all do, and the other ones that were involved, they all do need to know it. But at the end of the day, I think it was, I just wanted to turn him off going and doing something stupid again.
Yeah. And how did that affect you a year down the line? What was happening in your life?
I did hit some really dark times with the lack of sleep, which led to anger, which led to depression, which led to, I don't drink a lot, and it led to me drinking more than I usually would do. Okay. But then setting the ball rolling with this is Becky then put me in touch with somebody else who could get me counselling, which I should have had the counselling from my employer at the time, and also the local police should have even offered me somewhere to go. If you feel like you need to go and speak to somebody, go here. Here's a number for you to call to make an appointment and things like that. But no, it was Rob getting in touch with the whole system that kicked the ball rolling of me then going to see a counsellor to get coping mechanisms to cope with the after effects of it.
And was that part of the reason for saying yes then? You were experiencing this, the sleeplessness, you were saying you were struggling with maybe drinking, there was depression and stuff there. Were those motivating factors in you saying yes as well?
No, because after that initial first phone call, I think it was a few weeks after that Becky had put me in touch with Karen, who then, because I think they both came round and they just kind of like did a little interview at the house, and it was, I remember my youngest son, I think he was only about a year old at the time. So, and that was a couple of years after the offence, and it was it was then with listening to, with them both, with her and Karen, listening to what had gone on and how I was feeling and things like that. It was then Karen that suggested, well, go and speak to these guys at Starfish, I think it was, and go and speak to somebody. And, you know, they can give you coping mechanisms. Sometimes it's just getting it off your chest that makes you feel better and things like that. And that's what set that ball rolling, because it wasn't until, I think it was a good 18 months, 2 years. It was at least 2 years after the offence before I actually went and spoke to a counsellor about it.
Okay, dead on.
And that was because I didn't know where any were, because I had no support from the local authority or my employer, and it was, which again, feeling forgotten.
Yeah. So that's one of the things we'll talk about in one of the later episodes, in terms of how, you know, the process provided you with access to support as well. We'll delve into that a wee bit deeper. Rob, coming back to you then. So obviously, Gemma is spoken to and is willing to take part. That obviously comes back to you to say, listen, we've got a yes here. What's going through your mind when that information comes to you?
Like I say, because it wasn't just like done phone call, are you going to do it? Yeah. So then you'd be nervous, because with the team with Restorative Justice, how they do it, it's slow, it's methodical. It was in my eyes, it was like, as soon as she said yes, because I was working with Restorative Justice, it was easy. It was right now, I know what I want to do. There was no, I didn't need to start thinking, right, what am I going to say? I knew exactly what I was going to say. Look, I'm sorry for what I've done. This isn't me. So once I got the yes, then that was it. It was a big foot forward.
Okay, so things start to progress forward in regards to that, and that's probably what we'll talk about in the next episode, in regards to how that actually started to move forward. But I just want to say, first and foremost, folks, thanks for sharing, you know, your initial thoughts there in regards to what happened. That it can't be easy sometimes, you know, to maybe relive, but there's maybe a testament to the process that you've both been through, that you're able to be here in the room together and talk so openly about what happened and about your decision to choose restorative justice as a means to try and help you deal with some of the needs that you both had in your lives in regards to what you had experienced. In the next episode, what we're going to do is we're going to explore how Gemma and Rob were actually prepared for taking part in a restorative meeting, and we'll have a few more guests in with us on that to explore exactly how that works. So thanks for listening, folks, and until the next episode, look after yourselves and take it easy.